Hello, I am Michele Leclaire, Executive Director of Buckham Gallery. Today, I am chatting with Heidi Brueckner about her exhibition, Monsterbet, an Aberrant Abecedarius, on view through July 23rd. Additionally, this exhibition of oil and mixed media paintings may be viewed on our website at buckhamgallery.org. Monsterbet is a series of cultural allegories based on the traditional format of children's ABC books, but with a layer of social commentary. Each letter of the alphabet stands for an invented monster that has a peculiar quirk. The works are playful and fanciful while simultaneously symbolic and conceptual, touching on some of the artist's favored themes of human vice, mortality, and fear. This series includes many types of mixed media, such as sewing pins, safety glass, vintage Italian doll's eyes, eyelashes, screen, seeds and pods, flocking, dollar bills, astroturf, computer keyboard keys, leaves and blossoms, band-aids, dice, garlic skins, lace, glitter, springs, and paper. Before we join the conversation, I would like to say thank you to our incredible audience, whether visiting the gallery in person or viewing these videos online, and to all the artists who submit to our exhibition calls. I appreciate you. Next, I would like to say a big thank you to all the individuals and organizations who support Buckham Fine Arts Project and Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Michigan Arts and Culture Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. The Greater Flint Arts Council Share Art Genesee Grant Program, made possible by the Genesee County Arts, Education, and Cultural Enrichment Millage Funds. Your tax dollars at work. Thank you. Buckham Gallery is pleased to present Monsterbet, an Aberrant Abecedarius, a solo exhibition featuring work by Heidi Brueckner. Brueckner has been a professor of art at West Valley College in Saratoga, California for over 20 years. She graduated from UC Santa Cruz with degrees in both art and art history and earned an MFA in painting from University of Kansas. She has shown her work widely, nationally and internationally, in over 100 solo and group shows. During 2020 to 2021, she won 12 first place awards, among others, including Italy's International Prisma Art Prize and the Faber-Berian Color Award. Brueckner lives and works in Oakland, California. Welcome, Heidi. I am so excited to have the opportunity to chat with you today, a fellow alphabet lover, and share your work with our Flint and digital audiences. I absolutely love your playful imagery with dark undertones and use of materials. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk about the work. It's really an honor to be showing with you.
Yeah, oh, thank you. It's been a lot of fun having it here, and then I love having this opportunity to hear a little bit more about your thoughts in the process and getting to know you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to start with a little background information. So generally speaking, where are you from and sort of what led you to this art path as a maker?
Yeah, I love that question, by the way. I love hearing it from other artists too. So yeah, I'm from a small town called Claremont, California. That's in the southern area of the state. It's about an hour drive east of LA. It's a college town. There are 6 colleges there. So I've always had a fairly academic kind of worldview. My dad was a professor at one of the colleges, Pomona College, and so then I really, as a teenager, kind of decided that I wanted to get the heck out of there when I was able to and go see the world. So my idea of that was to go to Northern California, which I sort of related to culturally a lot better. So it was a great move on my part. And I went up here in the Bay Area to UC Santa Cruz. My dad and mom were both into the arts. So I always had a kind of a very positive viewpoint of the arts. I think in that sense, just that it was meaningful. It was respected and meaningful in our house. And so I wasn't much into really doing visual art as a young person. I always loved kind of beautiful things and well-crafted things, and I was always interested in thinking and looking at art but it wasn't something I took really seriously. My mom was a painter, and so I guess there was that influence, but really, once I got to college, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. That was back in the old days when people were allowed to not know what they wanted to do when they were a freshman. So then I took a bunch of anthropology classes because I thought I would be interested in that. I'm very interested and was really interested in other cultures and traveling and things like that, which I didn't really get a chance to do as a young person. So that was sort of the foray into studying. And then I got more into just looking at the art of different cultures. And so in that way, I started to change my mind about maybe the major or the emphasis and started thinking about art history. So I declared as an art history major. And then, I really understood that I had this love and passion for art. I didn't quite understand how it related to me. So, I started to get really interested in doing art, but I was sort of making excuses not to be an art major, just because of, the typical, what are you going to do with it type of scenario. Not that art history is much, better, but it's kind of like, maybe I could write or something. So then, but then I took a year abroad. So I went to, I studied in Heidelberg, Germany at the University of Heidelberg. And during that time, I was able to really scour the museums of Europe. And that solidified it for me that I needed to. It wasn't even a question of, anymore, that I just said, there's no way I can't not be in the creation part of it. So that was a really pivotal moment in my life. And I had taken some art classes in college just because they had required that for art history majors, and it was an interest. So then I got back to the US, and when I did that, I really started studying art really seriously.
Yeah, well, I think that's fascinating that actually, rather than maybe just the studio classes you took as an art history major, but it was more actually seeing the works in the museum in Germany that you were drawn to. Was it particular styles of work? Was it that you would?
Yeah. I mean, I went everywhere in Western Europe at the time. It was, you didn't travel much to, it wasn't as easy to travel to Eastern, countries. So I went pretty far and wide. I was up in Norway seeing the Munch Museum, and I was down in Rome seeing all those wonderful ruins and wonderful museums. So, but I think my first love was German Expressionism. I think that's something that really had always been really super interesting to me, and I felt very connected to it. And so I had known about it, of course, before I left, because I had I had studied art quite a lot. And so that's always actually kind of been my first interest, and still is kind of that kind of the gritty, angsty kind of vibe has always been kind of something that rang true to me for some reason. And I don't know if it's genetics. My dad was originally from Berlin, but somehow it's kind of like, so that's all a whole other discussion. But yeah, so I was really I think I actually saw your conversation with Michael, the other artist that's showing, last name
Wegman, yeah.
And he was saying how he really admired Otto Dix, and I was like, oh my God, this is he's like one of my, high gods and in the art world. So I was really influenced by him, and of course a lot of other painters associated with that, and that sprung out of that and spun off of that and had since been influenced by that movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I thought it was interesting when you mentioned the German Expressionism. When you said you were in the museum in Germany, of course, that's what I thought of, but I know there's a rich history of many other types of art. But of course, I love German Expressionists, so that's what I thought of. And I also thought back to that conversation with Michael. It's like, oh, how interesting to have both have been largely influenced and kind of coincidentally in the show at the same time.
Yeah. So it's like, wow, because he's a well-known artist if you're in the art world, but not a lot of, he's not like a household name, and he's not always one of the artists that people bring up. So I thought it was interesting as well. So
yeah. Oh, I love it. That's awesome. So as I mentioned before, I just love the Monsterbet, and I love alphabets also, and I would love to hear what gave you the idea. How did you come up with creating your Monsterbet and Aberrant Abecedarius?
Right. I've always been very focused on figurative work, and particularly working from life. And so, however, part of that interest connected with allegory and archetypes. Started sort of going in that direction. And so I did a series in graduate school that was very figurative, but included a lot of mixed media and kind of wacky, additions of different sort of conflicting things in the background, and they were quite fanciful and more straightforward observation. It kind of blended with a lot of imagined imagery as well. And so then I started to sort of feel like, boy, I could almost just get into thinking about figures in a totally different way. One of my interests is world art. So I was always very interested in how the figure, it not necessarily just a human figure, but any kind of figure is portrayed in art. So at that point I thought, well, I'm going to go into, I'm really curious about the mixed media, and I'm really curious about, I'm very curious about, I would say, I have a love of social commentary. And so I thought maybe I could drop the kind of more traditional human figure for a while and see where this takes me. So I started thinking about having fun with that. I didn't know how it would work. Around this time, I had a kid. And so I started reading all these books with my child. And of course, these alphabet books start to come out. And I was always a little underwhelmed with them. Like I like, there's some really great ones, but there's some also very mediocre ones,
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, maybe I could do a series of paintings. I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of even a book or anything, but a series of paintings that would be 26 of them corresponding to the letters. And I could think about sort of something archetypal, but something totally different than the human figure. And so the idea of, maybe having morality and foibles, and, I've always loved the 7 deadly sins. And I thought that might be an interesting topic, but have it sort of have this innocent kind of appearance at first glance, being the alphabet book. So that's how I got into it. And I thought I could kind of make a book that I think would be cooler than a lot of these sort of books, mediocre kid books out there. And as a parent, you realize once you get these kids that as an artist, you have very little time to schedule these things in. And so I thought this idea of this series was really good for me at the time, because I could just continue to work in this format, and part of it was already kind of laid out in my head. And so I didn't want to say I didn't have to think, because each individual one was very challenging, but it gave me this sort of repetitive format that I think I needed at that time in my life, that would help propel me forward in a kind of a creative way without giving me so much pressure to think up new things all the time.
Well, it is interesting because there is a certain parameters which I could see would help when you have limited time. There's a standard size, each one is based on a letter, and then like the borders. So even you had a certain framework, and even though each one is so different and so incredible, the way you used your materials and everything, I can see where those little things would help guide something along.
Yeah. So I worked on the series for a long time, and it was basically during the time I was raising kids, which kind of worked for my headspace.
How long did you work on the series?
About 10 years, on and off, maybe a little more. And I was working on them a lot of them simultaneously, actually. So I didn't even put the finishing touches on them until 2018, which is when I finished up the series. And that's sort of when it all came together. Yeah, so it was a long haul.
Yes. That's awesome. So I guess that let's talk about, because it's an actual a poem that the Abecedarius, so each letter, so it's not just you made a monster with a letter next to it, which could have been in some other children's book or something. You're telling a story through these poems, and so I was kind of curious, did you start with the monster, or did you write the poem, the Abecedarius, to then create the egg or the chicken? What came first?
Yeah, exactly. Like you might expect, it was all kind of mixed up. I would say generally I would come up with, I think I would come up with the archetype first, and maybe getting a little bit more specific, something to do with the standard of beauty, right? So we're looking at the A is for Almi there, and so that one's the beauty monster. And so then I would start, there was a lot of writing and a lot of planning, just in terms of what kind of imagery and materials would be used. And so the thing about the language was, this is the first time I've used language in my work. And it was really exciting to figure out the best turn of a phrase to create the meaning. And so, I would play around with different ways of saying things, or, if I like a word, maybe I'll, like one of them, the J letter is I use the word expectorate, and I just love that word. And so at some point I thought, this is a junk monster, this is a pollution monster. Maybe I want to use this word expectorate, because that's what I think about when, about pollution. It spews and it's disgusting. So that's kind of how, it would go. But I guess basically it was more about the concept, and then figuring out the words and the best turn of a phrase to create the meaning behind it.
Yeah. Oh. I love that. Did you kind of try it out on, not to bring it back to kids, I'm sorry, but did you try it out like on your kids, or like, and A is for Emily and the different poems, or I don't know, like I can see sometimes it would make people laugh, but then you also have this sort of darker turn, this like critique on society also. And I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious, yeah, when you're talking
Yeah.
about it.
I mean, it definitely is sort of a series meant more for adults in the end, you know. But I mean, one person that I didn't discuss was, I mean, this series is greatly influenced by Edward Gorey, and I love his you know, macabre take on the world. And so you know, I always liked those kind of books as a kid. And so you know, that was just for me remembering what I enjoyed as a child. And my kids would you know, they like to talk about them. I think there's also that element though, that, you know, this is my mom, and my mom, she's the person that's going to give me my, you know, macaroni and cheese. And the other stuff that she does, I don't know what she does, you know. And so it was very much that scenario as well. They would, you know, every once in a while comment on it and think about it, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely get you on that one. Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, so did you collect the materials sort of compulsively before starting and then also informed the work as it went? Or did you have to, once you had the idea for the monsters, go out and find the materials to support the idea?
That's really a good question. And it's again, sort of a mixture. So I'm a bit of a hoarder, as Michele, you being an artist, you probably know that type of person. And when I think something's cool, I'll just grab it and I'll store it. And I'll, you know, I got tons of shelves full of, you know, basically crap that no one else would want, but there's something about it that I like. And so I would go through that kind of stuff and I would figure out what might fit with the idea. But then there would always be, you know, generally I would say there would also be things that I'd have to seek out if I got the idea. So, you know, for instance, if the close-up of the death monster, the monster on the lower right, those band-aids, you know, I thought about this idea of, you know, medicine trying to kind of keep patching you up for as long as possible before you pass. And so the idea of a band-aid seemed kind of funny and just so, you know, everyday kind of milquetoast kind of object. But I thought, oh, that would be kind of a funny thing to put in. And so, you know, that specifically became something I went out and got because it you know, served the purpose of the concept. And just to follow up on that, because it might be very hard to see, and this is one of the things that was a little difficult, is the yellow background within, you know, inside the border of the band-aids is actually clear glazed package of the outside packaging of the band-aid. So the thing you pull open.
Oh my gosh.
So that, yeah, it's not super clear, but if you look really closely.
Oh yeah, no, I remember, I forgot, but yeah, I did see it when I was hanging them. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, and I love it because people will come and they stand in front of this piece in particular. Let me see if I can bring up, I think I just have it on the wall though. Yeah, no views on the wall. So it's a little bit hard to see there, but people will come up and be standing there looking at the borders and be like, oh, it's Band-Aids. It's not red automatically, you know, right at first. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I love making patterns out of stuff you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and the other one, they're like, and is that real money? Did you cut up real money?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it looks like it.
Yeah, those are all dollar bills that I cut up. So I definitely broke the law and defaced currency. But luckily, I'm in good company because I realized after I did that there are about a gazillion artists out there who have cut up money and done stuff with it before. So, you know, I thought I was this brilliant, you know, one of a kind artist. And then I saw like, it was kind of like, rah, rah, it's been done. but I still enjoyed it immensely. That was a real fun one to do.
Yeah, well, it's unexpected. Okay, hold on. Yep, there we go. That over the close up with that one, and I love the depth of the pins that make for the frame of that one also. Yeah,
that stands out as one of my most favorite things that I ever did in that series. Just something about that border, that inch thick border of straight pins. Just something about the feel of it, the look of it, the way it came out. And then also the process of it was super zen, and just I could kind of turn it off once I got to making that, which, sort of those mechanical types of ways of doing parts of art can be so soothing after after you've kind of come up with the idea. You can just kind of get it done. So, it was a lot of tweezers, dipping a pin into glue, and then putting it on the stack,
Yeah, well, it appears as though it was like one by one.
Was done one by one.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I had a really good time. There's something about my personality that was like, oh, I love this. It's so soothing, and I don't have to think about anything else, So I highly recommend it, the process.
Yeah, and then you'll get that sense of satisfaction,
Exactly. I was doing art.
Yes. Love it. That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you. So have you always worked with such a variety of materials with your, past and present work? I mean, looking at the piece behind you and some images I've seen from Instagram with sewn together Amazon packages. I mean,
yeah,
this is so, I love your resourcefulness and able to reuse these items.
Yeah, I really enjoy the discarded materials. I mean, I buy some new stuff as well, but have I always done it? No. I mean, I was really, I was just a painter for a very long time, and but I always loved mixed media as well, but I only did it was sort of like a side project. Always I'd make jewelry, and I'd make little collages, or I'd make just some kind of weird little sculpture out of found objects, and I always really loved that, and I kind of felt like it fed my painting, even though it didn't really have any crossover. And then so I mentioned that in graduate school I started to get into allegory with the figure, and it had a lot of sort of it was a series that was based on tarot cards, but they were giant tarot cards. And so there was a lot of it was another framed format series, and so and they had this kind of, they called out to me as being something that could be very playful in terms of the way you could work with materials. So that's actually when I started working with mixed media and paint together. And then that kind of satisfied that kind of side project art of my life, and it kind of came together. And so, there was that series. I would go on and in and out after that of just doing straight painting, and then doing kind of the combination. And then it really, something that I was really excited about at the time. So that's kind of why I went full force into the series of the alphabets through the Monsterbet series. So yeah, so now, I'm doing other kinds of work, but I definitely have remnants of that, interest in sort of unusual, unorthodox kinds of materials. And there's a lot of trial and error, with, is this going to work with paint? Is this, and so, I'm always like, okay, I think this will work. So, but yeah, so it's something that, and then I was speaking with one of the great art historians and art writers we have in the LA area, Betty Brown. And she's a emeritus from, I think, Cal State Northridge. Anyway, she said, I want your portraits, because I've been doing portraits more lately. She said, I want your portraits to get back into having some of that mixed media. And I thought, Yeah, I get that. So I was doing the Amazon bags, but then I started doing more stuff like paper and, so I'm kind of thinking about how I can kind of bring back straight pins into the portrait somehow, or, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I like that. Yeah. Um, have you found, I'm sorry, I have to ask about the Amazon bags just a little bit more. Is there challenges of painting on that surface, or, was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, for sure. So I used to use similar kinds of bags that were not Amazon bags that I would just get, like, it all started during the pandemic, by the way. So, if you'd order your groceries, if there was like a cool pack, they might give you like a bubble paper thing that it's like more like an envelope to keep it cool. And then so I started with those, and they were kind of like silver. So I have a couple of them that have silver and white. And then I started realizing, oh, the Amazon bags is what, tends to be something that just keeps stacking up, even though you intend to reuse them. And it really got, more intense with, I hate to feed the beast of Amazon, but, it got more intense with the pandemic, and they're just stuff you needed, that you couldn't get. So I just saw this stuff stacking up all over the place, and I thought, well, maybe I could do something with this. So yeah, it's actually a very laborious process of cutting them open and then piecing them together. And it took me a long time to figure out the correct, what glue I could use to affix them and to create the substrate. And so it's been an ongoing process that I've finally kind of worked out. And and then I also use things like paper bags, because at least in California, you couldn't even, bring in a used paper bag to the grocery store. You'd have to go and, get new bags every time. So, I did a painting that was just paper bags. So, that's been just kind of a fun offshoot. If there's something about the pandemic that kind of became interesting, that was sort of what happened, Yeah. And now everybody wants to give me their Amazon bags. Everybody.
And I'm sure you have too many now.
Yeah, I have too many.
Please don't send me your bag. Well, my paintings are small, so I tend to collect them too, and then I can just stick one of my paintings in it and fold it and take it with me if I'm going somewhere to deliver it. I'm like, it has its own bag.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe I'll send you some,
I've got plenty. But thank you. Oh, thank you. Okay, so Heidi, what are, some of the major influences on your work? Whether these are artists you're looking at, or like life experiences, or,
Yeah. So, we already spoke about that as in some sense. So I've always been, interested in German art and kind of angsty, macabre subject matter. Definitely always interested in the quirky. Always loved pattern and color. That's always been a part of my work. And therefore I've been very influenced by non-Western art. Actually, I did a whole sabbatical. I'm a professor at a college here in the Bay Area, and I did a sabbatical where I researched pattern symbolism from cultures all over the world, and then did work kind of based on the meanings of those patterns. And then I'd concentrate on one area of the world, say Africa. And the painting would be something about Africa and the symbolism used there. And so I've always been really interested in that aspect of it. And doing that sabbatical work really helped me to understand how to use repetitive pattern as a way to symbolize an idea. Besides it just looking neat, like I just like it because it looks neat,
Right.
So that's actually, and then also kind of the I think with the Monsterbet also just sort of looking to, as I mentioned a little bit, looking to other ways of illustrating a figure other than kind of the Western standard of proportion and it being human, references to human maybe, but different ideas in that way. And certainly Western art has its share of that too. But so I got very influenced by that. But my first love has actually always been figures. And so I took this really long break from the human figure. I guess I'm a traditionalist sort of at heart. Like, I'm very into observational art. I really believe in it as I think pedagogically, I really truly believe in it. I really put my students through the rungs of, you got to look at this and draw what you see and paint what you see, and then you can do whatever you want with it if you have those skills. So, I'm almost a little bit weirdly traditionalist, but I kind of go off in these zany ways. So, I mean, now that I'm kind of back more into the figure, I've always loved Lucian Freud. And, he isn't considered really a German expressionist, but obviously he was influenced by that, grew up in that part of the world, and kind of carried on that tradition. Anselm Kiefer is another person I love. I love his abstractness, but also his use of mixed media in his paintings. Lately, I've been really influenced by a lot of female figurative artists. So I really love Hope Gangloff. Bisa Butler is another person I really admire. She does a lot of pattern and figures, and it's funny because I've always loved that, and I've done art like that for a long time. It's really interesting to sort of see someone popping up and feel like a kindred spirit. Jordan Castile is another woman I'm very influenced by, and of course she was influenced by the great Alice Neal. So all of those people I'm very kind of always I go back to. There's a great figurative painter in Michigan, actually. I think she's at the University of Michigan. I'm not sure where, but her name is Teresa Dunn.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So so I'm looking at a lot of current work, and particularly just coincidentally female painters, although I love Kehinde Wiley, and there's certainly just some fabulous work being done with the figure at the moment. So those are basically people I'm very kind of tied to right now anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely have to look up a couple of those because I wasn't familiar with everyone, but that's really exciting. And it's interesting you mentioned having that sort of pedagogy and that base of everything being drawn from life, and then you're able to take that, because that is incredible skills that have that under you before inventing and experimenting. My background is similar. In I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and everything was draw the figure, paint the figure, sculpt the figure. We even it was figurative in our printmaking, and so yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you need to take a rest from it, like, okay.
Yeah.
I think that's why I got into the Monsterbet, because it was just so, kind of flippant and very much irreverent towards all that kind of stuff, So, but I guess it's just in me, I guess. So I came back. But yeah, I mean, it's that definitely a philosophy, I think, because you could, a painter can, or an artist can be anything they want to be, but if they have a variety of kinds of skills and ways of thinking, they can do anything they want. And so that to me, seems very important, that you don't want to be hindered by a lack of understanding about a certain way of working. And I mean, not to say that we all don't constantly learn and need to get better at things, and it's a lifelong process for sure, but I think having an open mind to really understanding the vegetable, that you have to eat your vegetables in order to also eat your ice cream, and so understanding perspective, for instance, I think is really important, just as drawing from imagination is. Yeah.
Do you find your experiences as a professor are influence you in the studio, or are you able to keep it kind of separated out?
Yeah, that's a really interesting, just a really interesting phenomenon. I think at certain times I'm more influenced than other times. If I'm not working as much in the studio, what tends to happen is that I get really influenced by my students. Like that's my creative outlet, you know, that I can see what they're doing and I think, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I never thought about it that way before. You know, I'll definitely have to think about how to work that idea into something I do someday. And then I feel like when I'm really engaged in the studio, I have a lot more that I can also just empathize with when they're going through something, or I can say, hey, you know I'm thinking about this right now, and it seems like maybe you are too. So I definitely think it goes back and forth, that it's not just me kind of spewing out the information. I feel like I gain a lot too, and it's about being in a community. You know, so when you're surrounded by other artists, it doesn't really matter even what level. You know, there's always somebody's always doing something interesting, even if they don't have maybe the skill level. You know, so I think that that's been really kind of a great full circle in my experience, to have that teaching aspect too.
Oh, well, that's great. So I know we touched a little bit about what's behind you, but what are you working on now, and where are you going, or thoughts you are having for the future?
Yeah, so I am, as I mentioned, I'm going back to these sort of life-size portraits. You know, interested in kind of integrating the mixed media, but very much interested in just the figure again. And it's oftentimes a combination of, some of them are like studies from life. It depends on if I can get, you know, somebody to pose for me. But also, you know, I again, like being a traditionalist, I was always like, oh, you can't work from photos, and that's, you know, not really being an artist if you're not. But I've sort of, with the pandemic, that kind of jolted that out of me. Like I just like, okay, well, you know what? I can't travel. I'm going to look up a lot of travel photography of my travels when I went to Cuba, or when I went to China, or when I, you know, blah, blah. And I'm going to travel this way. And then, you know, some of them were, boy, I can't spend much time with my mom now. She's kind of old and there's the pandemic. So I'm going to make a portrait of her, and etc. So it's kind of just was spurred on by the really missing of people and the social contact, that kind of got me going into where I'm going right now. And I think it just seems like a lot of artists are kind of doing that. So that's, for me, really exciting. One thing that's sort of a side project to the portraits is, I recently moved my mother into an assisted living. She's getting pretty old. And one of the, you know, I got a lot of her stuff because we had to clean out and downsize. One of the things I got from her that I had seen before, and had been really interested in, but kind of didn't remember, is I got this photo album that my great-grandfather had made. He was a photographer and an artist. And he had a trading post in Wyoming back in the mid 1800s. And he, because of the trading post, he had a lot of intermingling with the Crow Indian people in that area. It was in Sheridan, which is right on the border of Wyoming and Montana. And he had made this beautiful photo album of portraits of, I mean, just incredibly beautiful faces. And I have some of him with some of the people that were his, you know, I would say friends. but also, that sort of that they traded. And, they're fascinating. So I did do, and they're just so beautiful. Like, I thought, this can't be lost to history. It's something so incredible. So I thought, I did a painting of one of the photographs of, so, here I am working from photographs of someone I didn't even know. Like, that's another thing that's kind of interesting, where someone in front of you versus someone that you've met before or taken a photo of versus someone that you don't even know. And I am now speaking with a Crow Native American artist named Kevin Redstar, who I've contacted and shown him these photos. And because I wanted to somehow connect with an artist, say, in the Crow Nation, to just discuss what these things are, and to also perhaps do some kind of a dual project behind it. So what I am doing right now is that we have agreed, Kevin Redstar and I have agreed to take this photographic material, and both of us interpret it in our own way, and to create a present or an exhibit out of it. So the plan is it's still kind of in the making, but the plan is in a couple 3 years to have a show that consists of his work and my work and the original photographs.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's something that's kind of on the horizon, and I'm really hoping works out, but it's sort of seeming like now it actually is. So, that's something that I'm really excited about, that's happening.
Yeah, oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. What a great opportunity to not only connect with this other artist, but also with your grandfather, great
grandfather, yeah,
great grandfather, and the work that he did. That's a really, oh, that's really great.
Yeah. And I do want to just mention, because there have been photographers in the past that have kind of, Curtis, I can't remember his first name, last name's Curtis. He's very well known, but he kind of dressed up the Native American people and then took pictures of them. And I'm super aware of that. And in my interpretation and other people's, and including Crow people that I've talked to about these photographs do not appear to be in that kind of vein. And I am being very careful as to, kind of consulting, because I do think that there's, definitely some sensitivity around that, objectifying. So, I'm kind of working on that project with an eye towards trying to be, correct in the way I might approach it.
Cognate and respectful, it sounds. Very much. Well, when you were talking about the portraits and whether working from models or photographs, I mean, it sparked a question. You mentioned working with your picture from your mother, but what in the past, like the other people that you have when they were alive or otherwise, was there a reason why you chose them? They just happened to be who the model happened to be. I mean, was there a thought, because you were so much with allegory and story in your previous work, I was just kind of curious if there was something in that.
Good thoughts. Well, before I really got into allegory, I really painted the figure a lot, and I'm really into the human head. And so I did a lot of portraits, kind of throughout my entire, I guess, career. And, a lot of times it would just be who's ever around that I could get to sit for me. That takes a special person. They're not all willing to do that. And, so there was always that, that kind of, some interest or sub-interest that I had in art. But it's kind of blossomed, I guess, rather than me maybe being a little bit more academic in nature, to being, and then, they're not terribly academic. No, none of them ever were, because I'm more, an expressionist type of person. But but yeah, it's kind of blossomed into more now thinking about, I work with a lot of my own photographs now, you know, so if that I have made the step into working with photography, I tend to do work with my own photographs rather than, you know, I don't work on with other people's photos. So yeah, so that's something that gives one a little bit of a different opportunity. Like it maybe, you know, there's something about working from life that is very visceral and direct, and you know, it's a combination of many moments and conversations with your sitter and etc. Whereas and that's all really wonderful stuff. You know, I think a lot of great expression comes out of that. Alice Neal would be a person that you could look to see that. But I think also working with some of these photographs that I've done, you know, it gives you different compositional ideas than you've ever thought about. There's certain things that kind of open up that are different than it's a studio session. So yeah, I think it's just become very interesting. I'm really glad that I have the academic stuff under my belt, because I think they tend to turn out more, you know, there's more information that I feel like I can pull out of a photograph that I wouldn't have able to if I hadn't been a very kind of had the academic background.
Yeah, or something else you mentioned with like having a sitter, spending that time physically with someone, you know, there is of course that conversation, that exchange of thoughts and stories and whatever. So do you find, do you talk to the sorry, this might sound silly and I apologize, but do you like, not maybe not out loud, or maybe not, do you have like a conversation with the photograph while you're working? And you kind of, because you took the photos, you presumably you probably know the person, or maybe it's just that, are you having a conversation with the person while working on the painting?
Yeah, well, you know, definitely there's one that pops into my mind, and that's of a couple of rockers that I met in Cuba when I was traveling there. And actually there was kind of a group of them, and some of them were kind of like punks, and some of them were more sort of old school, you know, heavy metal dudes and varying ages. And it was a great experience. Like, they're a little scary and they were really wasted, and it was a little like weird, but then, you know, I said, hey, can I take a photo of you? And they were like, yes. They were so excited, and they all had all these tattoos, and they kind of got into posing, but they kind of were kind of like tough poses, and like the whole experience was hilarious and super fun. And then I didn't speak Spanish and they didn't really speak English, but the way they communicated was saying band names like Jimi Hendrix, you know. And then so I was like, yeah, Jimi Hendrix, you know. And then we had this kind of fun interaction. And so I have a photograph that I worked from for that particular painting. And you know, there were a series of photographs, but there was one that I worked with so far. And so that just reminds me of that whole, you know, it sort of will be always tattooed in my mind. Tattooed, I didn't mean to be like a pun there, but that experience is very alive for me because of that. And I do think about that as being sort of one of those, you know, those moments or a period of moments in life that are sort of ephemeral, but also kind of meaningful, that you kind of look back on as being something important, or that you will remember, you know, for whatever reason. So yeah, I do talk to them. And then this series of the Crow people that, you know, is coming. It's been a totally different experience, because the one painting that I have done was very much about focusing and concentrating and thinking, you know, about what this person's life must have been like. Totally different time, totally different place. And of course, you know, knowing the history of this country, what kinds of things happened, you know. And so that's something that is, you know, it's a narrative that you almost have to fill in the spaces. But But then again, I mean, I think that's about portraiture anyway, because if you don't know the person that I painted, even if I do, there's certain things that you fill in, you know, or you think, oh, I kind of know a person that might be sort of like that, or, you know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And and of course I asked because I talk to my paintings when I'm working on them. So I was like, I have all these like really in-depth conversations, like thinking about things and wondering where they are and what's going on. And so I just couldn't help but I'm like, wow. Because
And I can totally see that in your work, because you have like these dynamics, these human dynamics, these figures that have dynamics between them and stuff. So yeah, totally.
And I only sat for one major paint as a model, but I remember when I was actually standing for those weeks, but
Hard.
yeah, but it was really just an incredible experience to be on the other side, you know, and to those conversations that kind of came out of it, because when I was a student in like the studio classes in drawing, it was very quiet, and you might talk to someone else who's also actively drawing. But then when after school and I was modeling and I sat, it was surprised, like with a single artist, it was the conversation that going back and forth. That was
Yeah,
totally different atmosphere, I guess.
yeah, totally. And I never thought that I could talk and paint at the same time, you know. So after, you know, school and being in the classroom with a bunch of other artists where everybody's quiet, I never thought I could like have any noise or talk to anybody, but it just seemed to come naturally once I started doing it. Like, yeah, we're going to talk, and somehow you're sort of drawing things out of the person somehow almost. And that's part of it. And that's the thing from life, that, you know, it's a conglomeration of many moments, and really connecting in that way. Whereas, you know, photography being just one moment, you know, and that there's sort of this interpretation of one moment and what's that means. You know, very interesting to think about the differences there.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, this has been really great. Heidi, thank you so much. I mean, as I said, I love your work. I really enjoy being here, and each time I go over and look, because when people come in, I come talk about them and look, and I see things that I hadn't maybe noticed earlier on, and it's just been so much fun. But today, talking to you has been a real pleasure. So
well, thank you. And likewise. I really enjoyed it. And again, thanks so much for having me. And I hope we can keep in touch.
Yeah.
I'm proud of your work too. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, wow. So a big thank you to Heidi for chatting with me. It was really great. I loved hearing about her work and all these different materials and the way she like puts it together, and really her background. So thank you, Heidi, and I hope you, our audience, enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I thought it was really great, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks. Bye.